Welcome to Radio US. The recent wave of layoffs in the United States, which has been growing over the last several months, can be largely attributed to the actions and policies outlined by former President Donald Trump during his administration, as well as his recent Trump News Conference. These layoffs, which have affected thousands of workers across various sectors, are a direct result of the economic policies Trump pushed forward, focusing heavily on a protectionist approach aimed at bringing more manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. The Trump News Conference, held on February 12, 2025, where Trump discussed tariffs, government spending cuts, and workforce reductions, was a critical moment in this ongoing shift in U.S. policy. He emphasized his administration's ongoing efforts to restructure the federal government, arguing that unnecessary bureaucracy and bloated spending were draining the nation's resources. According to Trump, the implementation of policies like tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, as well as cuts to various government programs, would strengthen the economy in the long run. But the immediate fallout has been massive layoffs in both the private and public sectors. During the Trump News Conference, Trump proudly reiterated his stance on reducing the size of the federal government, which he deemed overly inefficient and wasteful. His approach to solving this problem was both simple and controversial. Cut personnel, particularly temporary and non-essential workers, and reallocate resources to other parts of the economy. This approach, while designed to streamline operations and reduce federal spending, has led to significant job losses in agencies across the government. The impact of these cuts has been felt most acutely in departments that have seen substantial reductions in their workforce. For example, agencies like the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the IRS have been forced to lay off hundreds, if not thousands, of staff members. This policy aligns with Trump's broader economic vision, which was a focal point of the Trump News Conference that emphasized creating a leaner, more efficient government and turning around a federal system he described as out of touch with the needs of the American people. While the overarching goal was to address long-term issues such as the national debt and inefficient bureaucracy, the immediate effect of these layoffs has been a destabilizing force for many communities and workers who now face uncertain job prospects. The layoffs have not only affected government employees, but also have led to repercussions in the private sector. Companies, especially in industries reliant on international trade, are grappling with rising costs due to Trump's trade tariffs. These industries, which rely heavily on raw materials like steel and aluminum, have faced price increases as a result of the tariffs that Trump outlined in the Trump News Conference. Businesses that cannot absorb these additional costs are left with no choice but to lay off workers in an effort to maintain profit margins. Trump's Trump News Conference had stressed that these tariffs were necessary to protect U.S. industries and workers, arguing that foreign countries had been taking advantage of the U.S. for years. However, the increase in production costs and the resulting layoffs have sparked debate about whether this approach is sustainable. Critics of Trump's protectionist policies argue that while they may be beneficial in the long run, the short-term consequences are damaging to American workers, especially those who find themselves without jobs due to corporate downsizing. Moreover, the Trump News Conference didn't provide much clarity on how these job losses would be mitigated, or if they would be compensated for in the future. In his speech, Trump proposed that the U.S. economy would eventually recover and thrive under these new policies, but the lack of immediate support for workers who are being laid off has led to widespread dissatisfaction. Many workers in industries like manufacturing and agriculture Sectors that Trump claimed to protect during the Trump news conference now find themselves without stable employment and facing a challenging job market. The layoffs have disproportionately affected low-income workers, who are the most vulnerable to job loss, and the transition to a new economic landscape appears to have left them behind. This has resulted in protests and resistance, with unions and advocacy groups calling on the administration to address the welfare of workers who have lost their jobs as a result of these policies. The Trump news conference was a powerful platform for him to reassert his administration's position on trade, tariffs, and the workforce, but it also highlighted the risks associated with a protectionist economic model that prioritizes national industries at the expense of the workforce. While Trump argued that American workers would ultimately benefit from the changes in trade policies, the immediate cost has been felt in the form of layoffs that have rattled both public and private sector employees. These layoffs have raised questions about whether Trump's vision for economic revitalization can truly deliver the promised benefits for the average American worker. As layoffs continue and economic uncertainty grows, it's becoming clear that the Trump news conference served as a critical moment in signaling a new direction for U.S. trade and employment policy, but whether that direction leads to long-term success or increased hardship remains to be seen. The broader economic impact of these layoffs, as discussed in the Trump news conference, is likely to reverberate throughout the U.S. economy for months, if not years. For many of the workers who have lost their jobs, finding new employment will not be an easy task. The industries that have been hit hardest by Trump's policies, such as manufacturing and agriculture, were already struggling before these layoffs began. The additional pressure caused by tariffs and government restructuring has made it even harder for these workers to maintain their livelihoods. The Trump news conference presented an image of a future where American industries would thrive under these policies, but for the workers facing job loss today, the future seems less certain. The lack of clear plans for retraining or re-employment opportunities only adds to the uncertainty that many workers are feeling right now. Additionally, the Trump news conference made clear that the administration's vision for the economy includes a significant reduction in the size of the government. While the idea of streamlining federal agencies may appeal to those frustrated with inefficiency and bureaucratic waste, the reality is that these cuts are causing real harm to workers and their families. The layoffs of federal employees, particularly those who have worked for the government for years, are leaving many without a safety net. The economic uncertainty generated by these layoffs could have far-reaching consequences for local communities, especially those where government employees form a large part of the local economy. For many of these workers, the Trump news conference has not provided much hope for the future, and the cuts being made to public services and jobs are only making their situation more precarious. In conclusion, the recent wave of layoffs in the U.S., which can be traced back to the policies announced during the Trump news conference, is reshaping the economic landscape in ways that are causing immediate pain for American workers. While Trump's protectionist policies were designed to create a more competitive environment for U.S. industries, the reality has been job losses and economic uncertainty for many workers in affected sectors. The Trump news conference presented a bold vision for the future, but the immediate costs of these policies, higher production costs, job losses, and increased economic instability, are weighing heavily on those who have already lost their jobs. As layoffs continue and the fallout from these policies grows, it remains unclear whether the long-term benefits will outweigh the short-term pain that many American workers are now experiencing.